my 2024 in-ear monitor live show rig. I wanted to start this year off ready. I've had multiple versions of this rack in the past, and I've taken notes onto what I need to make things faster, easier, and just less stressful for my own use cases. My rack is a combo of in-ear monitoring, playback, and I have a wireless mic too, so it's like microphones. So let's start out going from the top. The top shelf holds my Play Audio 12 and this little dock thing. In our live set, we use a couple of different MIDI keyboards and drum triggers that are all running through sounds per song in our Ableton session. There's like a lot of options for running that kind of stuff with Play Audio 12 for sending MIDI, but this way was just like the most affordable. This specific one that's powered was like 60 bucks maybe? Whereas like iConnectivity's, Mio's, they're a couple $100. I use the Play Audio 12 for our playback so that we have more control over volume of all the tracks in our ears. I have a stereo split of percussion and drum trigger sounds, a stereo split for all the melodic backtracks, a mono bass feed, a click and guide feed, a separate mono feed for just hearing the VST instruments, and then 3 different feeds for going to straight to front of house for like a stereo of all the tracks, and then 1 single bass feed. I didn't want to have to send all of that out to front of house when I'm not familiar with the sound engineers, so just having all our tracks in just 1 single stereo feed and then 1 single mono bass feed was just simple enough for like most cases and most venues to at least have a balance between those. Next up is the power conditioner. This one powers their in-ears and my wireless. I used to have guitar wireless at one point, and I just haven't changed the label. So below that, this is the start of all the wireless components. First, I have a Shure Slxd4 wireless mic. This is like the Beta 87A. I really like it so far, it's pretty cool. And attached to that is a Shure PSM 300. These are both mine. I've had my PSM 300 for the longest time. Below that, we have our drummer and guitar players in-ear monitors. For these, I got both just the Phenyx Pro PTM10s. These are both budget stereo in-ears, but they still run on like radio frequency, so it's a lot better than like the 2.4 or 5 gigahertz bands. They say that they occasionally hear like some pops every now and then, but you can alter the band that you're using. They just don't have like auto scan methods. Otherwise, they work fine and they're in stereo. Below those is the antenna bay. This is kind of the limit for how many antennas I would run here. I wasn't really sure what sort of antenna combiner I could use when we're all running different bands of frequency, and then also it's mixing different brands. So I didn't know if there was something there that would create some issues. If you have any insight on that, leave a comment below, because I would love to not have to worry about this. Below that, I have an empty space. Had nothing to put there. And then I have a second power conditioner. I have 2 because at one point, my playback rack was in a separate unit. Also, every company has their own sort of wall wart plug. It's so frustrating. So it's impossible to fit them all into 1 single power conditioner because they're all shaped differently. So I just figured I'd separate them just based on how easy it is to plug in wall warts for all the devices. Next up is our Behringer digital mixer. This is the XR16. I kind of wish I made a better choice in this case earlier on, because I thought this was enough channels for input and output for our ears. But even going up to the XR18 would have been just so much more helpful in our case. There isn't really anything wrong with this one right now, so I'm using all 4 aux sends and the master output, so that there's 3 total sets of stereo feeds to our ears. I've tried mono, I just don't like it. And if I have the option for stereo, it's just a lot easier to hear everything, especially when I'm the one kind of trying to hear everything going on. The only time this unit has really caused me like a roadblock, probably from my own fault, I didn't realize that there aren't 16 mic pre's, it's just 8. And then below that, there's just 8 other 1/4-inch inputs that don't have mic pre's. I made that mistake earlier on by accidentally routing microphones into the bottom. Don't do that. It would make things a lot easier if all the channels had mic pre's. And that's where the XR18 would be nice. Plus they have like more aux sends for if I want to play live with more people. Below the mixer is our Patchbay and the rack split. These kind of just go hand in hand with signal routing, and there's nothing really special about them. There's a lot of empty slots because for some reason you can't find Patchbays that are cheap enough that have fewer ports. In terms of like the order of operation, everything goes into the split and then would come out the Patchbay. So for the split itself, there's a vocal input. That's where my mic goes in. This is my guitar. This is Ross. vocals. This is our guitar player and keys. Also, he does background vocals, so he goes there. That's his guitar. And then this is Matt as our drummer. That's his vocal mic. He doesn't really sing, it's just more like talk back. Above that is our Patchbay. So my vocal comes out of that first one, then it's my guitar, Ross's vocals, Ross guitar, Matt vocals. That's why these are all purple, so they just coincide with everything that goes into the split. And then the three over here are single mono bass feed, and then the left and right tracks for front of house. This is everything that goes to front of house for us, besides a live drum kit. And then we don't send that to our ears because we're playing with drum triggers. There's also not a lot of stage volume for us, so it's not hard for Matt to actually just hear his drums as he's playing, especially when the kick and snare are going to the ears because they're being triggered by the drum triggers. Okay, onto the back. But before that, this is the warning. It's not the cleanest because I've had so much like mismatch, but with different brands over the last couple of years, and cables based on what I owned at various points. So there was some uniformity to it at some point. Still makes sense to me. I guess that's all that matters. Okay, let's do it. Pretty ugly. Some of these cables are like obnoxiously long, but it's also a matter of just trying to keep things tidy. Here's where you can see where I was talking about with the different size wall warts and how they get in the way of other plugs and pieces of rack gear. It's so annoying. On the bottom, I have this shallow rack drawer that currently holds the in-ear packs and microphones. I definitely need some proper foam for this drawer, but it just keeps these smaller things ready and organized instead of just in a bag. All right, you've seen enough. So when it comes time to play, we plug in our MIDI instruments here, the keyboards, and the drum trigger interface we have is a E-drumming. And then we plug our mics into the front, as well as the guitars. So like once everything's plugged in, I have this 8-channel XLR snake, color-coded feeds, as well as each one being numbered and labeled on the end of it. That way I know for sure which one goes where, what number that feed specifically is, because I also have like a little cheat sheet for the sound engineer that like when we're plugging things in, just to know that like there's a numerical order to certain things. And then when they ask for line 2, I can read the sheet and know exactly what line 2 is for like sound check. I think the only things that I potentially like want to improve this year have to do with creating another feed for in-ears in case we want to play with like a bass player live instead of just having bass in the tracks. Currently we would just have to get like another in-ear pack for whichever feed might get a better picture for bass monitoring. I don't really know which one that is right now, but we'd essentially just have to give them a copy of a feed. Otherwise I just have to get a whole nother in-ear monitoring system, and then that would introduce another antenna. And that would get a little bit dicey on interference at that point. I would love to have some way to run my mic through like some processing live. It would require another interface that lives in this rack, and I don't have an extra interface at this moment. I think I would actually love to learn how to properly solder cables. That way I could make my own patch cables. Maybe I could make my own like power cables so everything is a lot cleaner. I could get by with using one power conditioner, I don't know. That's it, that's my rack. Let me know if there's anything here that you like that you might incorporate on your own rack.